Okay, today me and Christy are covering episode 13 and 14 of season one of Supernatural, starting with Route 666, which I never have said that title out loud before. It's very cheesy.
Yeah,
Like, that's
I
very silly.
I was kind of I don't know. I think I remember a time when I don't know that they would have been able to get away with a title like that.
It's so silly. And we don't even deal with demons in this episode. So it's
No,
like, it's just a silly title. Okay, are you
yeah.
ready? Let me get into the recap of the oh, I just knocked my microphone. Let me recap this. So Route 666, which is not about a demon, though the 666 might make you feel like it is. One of my first notes that I wrote down was literally, apparently this is the first episode written by Mike Cruz, like the Sam Fam's like least favorite writing team. So that's fun. Like I forgot about, what is it, like Buck Lemming and someone else?
I think they are Buck Lemming
It's
are
Buck
like
Lemming.
are
Like
yeah, are
Buck
our
and
names for
then
them.
okay.
Yeah,
Apparently they are here in season one for this episode, and then they don't write another episode until season seven, which I guess is good. Not to give
yes.
away my impressions of this episode, but I didn't love it. So I was watching this one and I was like, I remember it's Route 666. I know it's these writers who tend to really like, they just love to write about Dean. So I knew it'd be a Dean centric
Yeah.
episode. And I was like, is it the Cassie episode? Because I remember like watching back in the day, like when I first started, and kind of liking the episode because I liked Cassie and I liked Dean like having some backstory. So I thought that I would enjoy this episode. But 10 years later, here we are, post, so much like racial unrest and like kind of living on my own in Dallas and watching a lot of this firsthand. This is a very cringe episode.
It
So
is.
the second thing I wrote was, oh, this is the racist truck episode. And so despite me remembering correctly that it was the Cassie episode, I like didn't remember what her story was. So at the beginning of this episode, a black man is driving a car, and then this insane truck that has like it's like 2 stories high. It's like, and I also wrote in my notes, as someone who lives in Texas, I can say with confidence that they did nail what type of trucks racists tend to drive. So I was like, great,
Yeah.
yeah, that is a racist truck for sure. And this truck slams into this poor black man. It causes his car to crash, and then we go to the boys. And
Yeah.
so then I think Sam is in this cute little sweater. It's like a green sweater, and he's like, we're gonna head to Pittsburgh next or whatever. And Sam Ardine's like, no, we're not. We're headed this way. I just got a message from an old friend. And that's when I was like, oh, it is the Cassie episode. And so apparently Cassie and Dean have been together in the past. They dated, it was serious. Dean is a little cagey about being upfront about that. And he reveals that she contacted him because she thinks there's more to this man's accident than what meets the eye, and she knows what Dean does. This sends up like alarm bells for Sam because Sam was like, I was with Jessica for a year and a half and I never told her. And you just told this girl you just claimed to have dated a few weeks. And so they kind of get into it, but he's just like, whatever, we're going. And so they go. It turns out this man who was killed is Cassie's father, and this is a truck that is connected to a racist ghost, and the racist ghost is coming after black people. So then there's all this stupid discussion throughout the episode, like as if you don't understand like the civil rights movement in 60s and like how things like so culture has changed in America. It's
Yeah.
very strange. Like at one point, like this crying. Okay, so Cassie's mom is white, though her father is black. And so her white mother is crying about this situation where she explains that the ghost is a guy that she watched her now deceased husband kill with a baseball bat, because at first the white guy who her husband killed was committing a hate crime on him. And she was like, yeah, like, I mean, he did this, and it's like, then they all pushed his truck like into, I don't know, a ravine, or I was it into
Like a
water?
lake? Yeah.
Yeah, I missed the part. I missed that part because I was just like, okay, I was like taking notes, like, okay. And she's just like, now there's no one to protect. And like, I'm like, your daughter A is sitting right next to you, and the ghost's coming after her. But also, like, Dean says, well, why didn't he go to the police? And I was like, Dean, are you literally stupid? Like, and that's one reason I think the writing isn't great in this episode, because it doesn't believe that the viewer understands American history. Like, I'm just like, girl, you do not have to make Dean an idiot to
Right. I
like,
was going to say it also betrays like the characterization of the boys that we've gotten where they would know this. They don't go to the police anyway.
yeah,
So
you're right. They're like, well, we avoid the police. We understand why you would avoid the police, because ACAB, like, like, cops
yeah,
be racist, especially during the civil rights movement. So I thought that was really wild. Anyways, it turns out the ghost is taking revenge on all the people who like buried him back then. What I don't understand is the timing. Like, why is this happening now? I must have missed that, or maybe they didn't explain it.
I think they said that the mayor was redoing his house that he had bought from the Cyrus family, who
Oh,
was the dead guy, right?
that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. I was like, why didn't you get all pissed now? This is like 40 years later or whatever when they did this. So I guess that makes sense. And then in the end, um, they're not able to, there's no one driving the truck. And then I think at one point they like dig up his body from somewhere.
Yep.
Where did they get it? I thought he was pushed into the ocean or the lake or something.
They pull it out with like a tow truck or something that
But
they just
how is he not
mysteriously got.
decomposed? I don't get, anyways, they burn his body, doesn't work. So Sam has this brilliant idea, which I would say is the best part of the whole episode to
Yes.
me, because he is on the phone looking at a map, because children back in the olden days, we did not have GPSs on our phone. In fact, these poor boys have flip phones. So if you didn't have a GPS, that was a separate thing that you had to like use with a satellite. You just used a map. And so Sam is like on a paper map on the phone. Dean is driving, like getting the truck to chase him. He's driving, and Dean is having this racist ass truck chase him. I don't remember why it's chasing Dean, because he's not part of the he's not connected to the family. He just
Was
like,
it just was it just angry that they tried to burn his body?
maybe he's like, I know they're trying to like get me, so I'm gonna get rid of them. I don't know why he was after Dean, but he was. And on the phone, Sam is guiding Dean, and without hesitation, which was really sweet. Like, Dean's like, okay, and he's like doing what Sam tells him, doesn't even know what Sam's plan is. And at the end, he tells him to like turn really fast, and it kind of fishtails the Impala into the entrance of this old gate. And Sam's like, let him come to you, like draw him in. And when the ghost like looks like he's gonna crash into the Impala, instead he whooshes away, because Sam has somehow gotten the Impala via the map and his instructions onto the hallowed ground of the old church, where this horrible man like committed another hate crime against a bunch of like choir children in that church. And so that's how they get rid of this ghost. And so at the end, Dean says goodbye to Cassie. He's like, maybe we won't be strangers all the time. Cassie's like, I know that's not gonna happen. And they just kiss, and maybe.
Right.
And
And he says, I wrote this down because it killed me so much. He like insists, no, I'll see you again. I will. And then
nope. Yeah, I wrote down, no, we will never see her again. And I like when they try to like expand the universe and say, oh, they have these connections in different places. But it makes me sad when we don't get to kind of follow up with that. Um, and so yeah, I was kind of bummed. So that's a synopsis. I guess we can get into talking about it. I did not enjoy this episode
No,
at
I
all.
I forgot how much I disliked this episode. And
I'm
it's
shocked
one of
because I
the
used to like it. I used to enjoy it, and now I'm watching it now. Like, oh, even like the dialogue is bad. Like, this
yeah,
is not a well written episode at all.
no, it's one that is aged so poorly
Hmm.
that I think what I was kind of like, okay, this isn't great, but I'll watch it. Like however many years ago is all of a sudden like, oh, this is a painful episode.
Yes, and I feel like too when we finally see like people of color in the show, it's just because the haunt is about racism
Racism and them dying.
and the people of color, yeah, they are the target of the haunt. And it kind of leaves a bad taste in your mouth because you're like, well, it would be nice if we had diversity for other reasons. Like just
Yeah,
like they introduce a women a lot of times so that they are the one that dies. And so I don't know. I know it was 2005. And we're like a civilization away from that since then.
yeah.
And we're not doing much better, but like at least we're a little bit more aware of certain dynamics. And so this one was just kind of wild, I will say.
Yeah, I don't know that this episode could have like that the script could have gotten through today. It's just so
Yeah.
like out of pocket,
I also
unnecessary.
yeah, and I also think people who drive trucks like that would have been like, hey, whatever, just because I drive that doesn't mean I'm racist. And it's kind of like, I don't know.
Stereotyping.
Are you sure? I mean, I do think there's some connectivity between like racism and like nationalism and like the denial of climate crime. If you're driving that
Right.
truck, you're probably a climate criminal of some sort. So I just feel like all his ideologies are probably connected in some way. So it's like, well, maybe you're not a racist, but you look like one. A lot of
Is it,
racists would drive that car.
I literally have in my notes for this episode, I have seen a truck exactly like this before, and it was doing burnouts to taunt us at Pride.
Oh my God. See, I'm telling you, the ideology of that truck just, it really does transcend. Like, I think it's funny that that still rings true. Like, there's still dicks out here. Like, I live in Dallas. I live in Dallas proper. Like, I am literally in the city, and sometimes I will still see big trucks like that. And I'm like, my dude, what are you using that for in the city? Like, you're literally just trying to like throw your dick around. And
Yeah,
I already feel like I know the kind of person you are. I mean, it might be really rude of me to say, but like, damn.
you know exactly that. And one of the things I wrote down, and I couldn't be bothered to actually look it up. I'm sorry, Vic is going to be so sad with me. I am not convinced that was actually like an early 60s truck.
Oh, I'm sure you're right. Like, it didn't look at
That was
all like,
no, that was late 80s at a minimum.
yeah, that's definitely like at minimum 80s racism. That was not
Yeah.
the kind of racism vehicle you might see in the 60s.
Um,
The racism
that
vehicles of the 60s was like a tank that like literally
right.
ran over protesters.
That haunted me. And the other thing that I wrote down as being like really incongruous with the reality of what they were trying to show is the freaking picture of Dorian Cyrus or whatever that they kept showing us. That is like the most early 2000s license picture that I have ever seen.
Oh my God.
You
We'll have to
cannot
send
tell
me.
me that man was from the 60s.
That's so funny. Yeah, they
And
did.
every time they showed it, it was haunting me. It was so
They really were trying to like create something. And they're trying. Here's the thing. I know they're recording in Vancouver, I think, right? In season one, especially, they were like, Vancouver is cheaper than LA or whatever, wherever they usually record. And they were trying to really push that, like, this is Ohio or wherever they were saying it is. And I was just like, none of this feels correct. Like the setting doesn't feel correct. The time period they're discussing doesn't feel
Mhm.
correct. The like the way that they're discussing the culture of America and like how we understand our history doesn't fit. None of it felt organic. And I will go ahead and say that originally I thought Dean and Cassie's at least relationship and like the reunion felt organic. This time I did not get that. I felt like
No.
it was soap opera dialogue. I felt like the writers, and we know that they do this a lot, they were like writing fan fiction about Dean. And
Yes.
that's what this was.
This was very much a look at how sexy Dean is. We'll give you this extremely long, cringy sex scene to
It
make sure you know
was
it. It was so bad.
for like knees and legs and movement. And it was
Didn't
very
stop.
traumatizing as a person who had to watch it on Netflix. I'm not kidding. I immediately went to Amazon and I purchased the box set of the DVDs because I was like, I will never watch another episode of this show where a terrible song plays, and especially not a sex scene. It was the worst song I've ever heard. And I was just like, at the minimum, I enjoyed this originally because it was some like classic rock song that was probably fine and great and made sense for Dean. And instead it was like Rob Thomas-esque, like Santana like guitar playing, and then
Yeah,
Feel Me With Your Love or something. And I was like, what are we doing? And it made it so,
it was so bad.
oh my God, it
Like,
was, I'm like getting a little sick to my stomach now just thinking about it. So I was traumatized by that moment.
yeah,
It's not the episode's fault that Netflix doesn't have licensing to the correct music. But that did add a layer of like to the holes in it.
yeah. Sorry, someone was at the door. That's very weird. I never get people at my door.
Oh my God,
Um,
is it a racist vehicle or some sort of ghost vehicle? Don't answer the door.
I'm
Which,
not
can we talk
weird.
about how the truck did try to come for Cassie when she was in her house?
And she stopped it with the power of blinds.
Yeah, she was just like, well, if the headlights can't get in the windows, I'm safe. Like, I was like, just go upstairs. I was like, this is the only time I would ever encourage someone in a ghost like haunt to go upstairs. And because at least if the car drives through the bottom floor, you're okay. Like, it's not going to hit you. But instead, she was just like, I must block out the light.
Right. Yeah. If the headlights can't find me, then I'm safe. And she just keeps going back and forth between like those two rooms at the front of the house.
I don't get it. I didn't understand. It didn't make a lot of sense. I feel like because there were moments like that, the stakes felt really low. Because I was like, well,
Yeah.
obviously they're putting us in like dishonest peril. Like this doesn't feel real. This is just she's down here to be scared for the sake of the plot without it actually making sense for the plot. Like, I don't know. The same reason that we had a question where Dean was like, why didn't you go to the police? Well, I don't know, Dean. You think the law was going to help them out? Come on. Like, I'm mad about it.
Yeah. I did not realize how truly bad this episode was until to watch it through this time. And we don't even have Sam really to save us. He has like two really good scenes,
Yeah.
and the rest of it is just stupidity or Dean or both.
Mm-hmm. And I will say that Sam in this episode is really cute. Like I liked him kind of being the little needly brother who's like,
Yes.
ooh, Dean's got a crush. And like that was cute. And I also liked that like at one point he stops kind of like ribbing him and realizes like, oh, like you have like deep feelings for this person. Like you loved her. And then kind of gets like soft and sweet about it and is like, oh, like y'all deserve a chance or y'all deserve time to or whatever it is. Like he really he's kind of like the cutest little like brother, like the version of a little brother in this one. And that's kind of all, except for that one brilliant moment at the end where he like navigates Dean to the church on the phone. He's not even really there.
Right. Like that scene is so good for Sam.
Yeah.
Like I love that interaction. Well, how did you know that was going to work? And I wrote it down because I loved the line so much. Huh, honestly, the thought hadn't occurred to me.
I laughed so hard. I wrote, that is an earth sign ass answer, is it not?
It so is. He's so like casual about it.
It's
Like
like, oh, I never thought about how I could be wrong. I just knew I wasn't. Like,
one of the reasons that I think I adored him as a character right from the start. It's like, oh yeah, I never considered that I could be not right.
he's like, yeah, I love that. And I didn't even take it to mean because I do think that like people who don't like Sam do like to like cling to moments like this and be like, see, he doesn't even care if Dean is safe, or see, he's full of himself, he's so whatever. And I look at this and I don't really see it like that. I see it
No.
as like he wouldn't have like told Dean, hey, I have a plan, let's do it this way, if he wasn't already really certain that his calculations were correct. And he is a smart guy and he is an intuitive guy, and they also like didn't have an alternative.
Right. Like this was kind of your only option, but thankfully he's already two or three steps ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
It
I liked that Dean went with it too. Like didn't hesitate, was just like,
yeah.
okay, man, what are we doing? Like, damn, like, and it worked.
Yeah. Um that's a little bit of redemption in what is otherwise like a really, really bad episode.
Yeah, it's wild because I feel like had this story been written differently, the bones of what we watch could have been good. Like, I
Yeah.
love the idea of Dean having like a passionate love affair in his past that he's not over, and like getting to see him confront that. And I really like Cassie as a character. She's so sweet. I think I said something like, I said Dean told a girl he barely knew their secret. And then I went, but when I see Cassie, I understand why. Because she's like
Yeah.
so hot. She's
Oh,
so
that
beautiful.
outfit at the end with like the tank top and the leather jacket that she's in. Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it, Dean.
Yeah. And so like it makes sense to me that someone like her would be someone like very impactful in Dean's past, and I want that kind of thing. I love finding out little nuggets like that about the boys as they like go on their journey. I just wish this specific episode had been written better, because shockingly, the only parts they wrote really well were the Sam part. They gave him a lot of cute stuff. Go ahead.
And there's a good scene right at the beginning that kind of brings in that double standard that Dean and Sam have been, coping with more and more throughout the first season
Yeah.
when Sam calls him out on the fact that he told Cassie, but Sam himself wasn't allowed to tell Jess. And
Yeah.
then they just drop it.
Yeah, they do. I think they come back to it a little bit where like Dean apologizes for telling Cassie, and then Sam says that he understands and that like, we all need to have someone we can confide in. And I think that was an interesting line for him, because I'm like, who do you confide in though? Because you don't,
Right. He doesn't have anyone.
yeah, he like, who did like, who are you talking about for you? But it was nice that he like, he was like, I understand now that I see she's not just some girl, like she's maybe your first love, maybe you're a great love, and I get it. You need to confide, in someone. And I said that I love that Sam continues to needle Dean a bit about Cassie and their unfinished business until Dean actually faces it and he decides to like go out that night alone. And it's
Mhm.
playful and affectionate, but it does get Dean to kind of like, he's like, don't mess up this opportunity. Like, we're here. You should actually, at least go see, in his own way, he's trying to like encourage him to go face this, go see what comes of this.
And I think maybe I'd be a little bit more tolerant of all of that if like it wasn't just thrown out at the end.
Right.
Like we never hear about her again.
Mm-hmm.
She's not even one of, and this is a not great thing to say, but at least at the end of, is it season 8, we have all of the characters who return just to die.
Yeah, Sarah's one of them. We
And
haven't gotten to see her yet this season, but she will be one of them.
like I don't want Cassie to die, but like she literally never even gets brought up in terms of that.
I feel like they kind of replaced Cassie with Lisa, where like
Yeah.
Lisa's another great love that Dean had, and it might be that Dean has a son. And then it's like once we have Lisa's presence in the show, it's like we're supposed to forget that they established Cassie as a great love of Dean's as well. And
Mhm.
I don't know. I think it'll be interesting as we continue to move through the series at this point, because I've never really thought about it, but like how odd it might seem, like considering Cassie's role allegedly in the mythos of Dean when we do meet Lisa and
Right.
the boy later.
Just odd writing choices. I think, as you said, the bones of it were okay. It just, Buck Lemming was not the team to write this.
No, no. And it didn't really give us much of the myth arc either, so it's kind of a forgettable episode.
At least we had a good Sam scene, because other than that, this is really forgettable. Like, I don't hate it as a filler episode, maybe, but that's all that it was.
It was filler and it was cringe.
Yeah.
Let us do our wardrobe judgment for Route 66. What did you think? Out of horrendous, adorable, genuinely good, or terrible but great?
I put adorable because we do have that really good sweater in the beginning.
Yeah, me too.
And then there is a flannel that he wears. It's like blue and brown that I think I've obsessed over multiple times. I love it so much.
Yeah.
So I'll give them that one. It was adorable. He looked good.
I agree. Okay, so now we're gonna rate this episode. So on a scale from 1 to 5, we're gonna rate it by screen time, we're gonna rate it by Sam girl enjoyment, we're gonna rate it by like heart eyes. So what do you think, Christy, starting with screen time?
I would give this like a 1.5, maybe. Like, yeah, he was adorable in the parts he was in, but we also sat through like a 5-minute Dean sex scene.
Yeah, I gave it 1.5. He's barely on screen. He just isn't there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even if he's there, he's just decorative, giving puppy eyes in the background.
Yeah. And yeah, again, this is a scale for Sam girl friendliness, not necessarily how quality is the episode, but I would also argue though that this is not a good episode in general. So what about Sam girl enjoyment? What did you give?
I gave it a 3 just for that rescue at the end that he has in his. I never thought of it. So I gave it a 3 for that, but that's it.
I gave it a 2. Girl, I'm hard on this episode. I was like, it's cute, but like, where is he?
Yeah.
All right, and heart eyes, what did you think for?
Again, like a 2, a 2.5.
Yeah.
Let's go with the 2.25 because again, he looks really cute giving the puppy dog eyes in the background.
But that little green sweater. Yeah. I gave it a 2 because I was just like, he's barely there. And the horrific music, and again, this is really not fair to the episode because it's a Netflix thing, but that horrible music really traumatized me. So my heart eyes were like deflated a little bit.
Yeah, there is a really good shot. I wrote this down of him standing in front of the fire after they burnt the body.
Ooh.
It's beautiful. Like, I have to give it a little bit of credit for that.
It really was nothing. So I gave it a 1.83 average. You gave it 2.25 average. Together, it is a 2.04 average. And I think that is officially so far the lowest rating.
Well earned.
Yes, very well earned. Now we get to talk about episode 14, which is Nightmare. And I'm so excited because this one was very, very I don't want to say meaty because it makes me feel weird, but it was meaty.
It was a bit of a redemption from the last one for sure.
Yeah, if we had to do one that I feel was really light on the myth arc, this I would say maybe is the heaviest episode of myth arc that we've watched so far. This is
Yes.
huge revelations. Okay, so let me summarize Nightmare. So at the beginning of Nightmare, very scary cold open, and it turns out to be one of Sam's premonitions. And a man is locked by unseeable forces in his garage and suffocated with the carbon monoxide. And so Sam wakes up in the middle of the night, absolutely like terrified, wakes Dean and convinces him to start driving. And on the way, he very smartly like calls in the license plate to find out the man's address. And they try very, very hard, but fail to get to this man's house before he dies. And when they get there, he has died. And so from there, they enter into this story where apparently other people in this man's family also start being harmed, seemingly by an unseeable force. But like the paramedics and the police just believe it's an accident, it's suicide, like they don't think it's murder. And it's hard to really tell what supernatural element is happening because there's no ghost, there's no connection to a vengeful spirit. Like it's just really confusing. So the first victim's brother then is killed horrifically. Like I can't even believe that they did this on like the CW or WB, whatever it was back in this time. But like this man, whatever force that's doing this, keeps opening his window in the kitchen, and then for whatever reason, the man sticks his head out the window, throat up, so that he is like his throat is completely exposed to the window, and the window comes down, decapitates this man, and you hear his head fall into the flower pot. And I was like, well, this is another one of Sam's premonitions. They rush over there. They try to stop the man from going inside. He won't listen because or earlier they were there as priests, which we will talk about. And he like runs inside and shuts the door, and I laughed because I was like, same. Hashtag mood.
Yeah.
And they're unable to save him too. And so it's clear something's happening to the family. Sam is distraught because he's having these visions now in the waking moments of the day. He has a vision of the young man who, the first victim, he's the guy's son, his name is Max. Sam has this vision of the Max's like stepmother being killed by Max. And what he realizes is that this young man has special abilities like Sam. He has like telekinetic powers. And he has started to punish his father, who was the suicide allegedly, and his uncle, who was the crazy window decapitation, for being essentially abusive his entire life. And the last victim he was going to pick was his mother. So Sam rushes to try to stop him. He is unable to convince him not to do this. And in the end, what he is able to convince him to do is just not hurt his mother, but he ends up shooting himself. It's devastating. So Max ends up committing suicide in front of his mother, his stepmother, Dean, and Sam. What is revealed in the conversation that Sam has with Max is that Max's father has always abused him since he was a child because he blames Max for his mother's death because she died when Max was 6 months old in their nursery, engulfed in flames pinned to the ceiling. And so Sam is like, holy sh-, like that's my story. Like we're actually, after the guy who killed my mom is the same guy who killed your mom. Like we can help you. It's just very devastating because he's like, oh my gosh, this means something. Like we're on the right track, only to then have Max pass away or complete suicide in the next scene. So that's the summary. It's very heavy. It was kind of longer than I wanted it to be, but it's a really,
Yeah.
really intensely important episode. Okay, so Chrissy, you get to start because I just yammered all.
Um, I know we've talked about this before on Tumblr and stuff, but one of the things that means so much about this episode and is going to keep coming up again and again is how much Sam connects with, in this case, Max.
Yeah.
And he needs this like reassurance that he's not himself a bad person.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And that I'm not a freak. I'm not a monster.
right. He has this whole conversation with the dean about, he's not a monster, he's just a scared kid.
Mhm. Who's been deeply traumatized his whole life.
Right.
Like the guy that got to play this role did such a good job because he was genuinely like he was wonderful at playing that role.
Heartbreaking, yeah. I love that Sam gets the chance to connect with Max, but then we also have that deeper characterization of him kind of needing Dean to reassure him, like, I'm not a monster, I'm not a freak. I need you to see that Max isn't either. Like, we can save him,
Yes.
which kind of again ties into this bigger idea, like, we can save me.
Yes.
Right? Like, he pins so much of himself on saving Max, which makes the end so much more devastating.
Yes. He's like, if I can save this kid with these same abilities and we can show him that he doesn't have to make these choices despite what's happened to him, he can make different choices, then that means I can still be in control of my destiny despite having these abilities as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so sad. Like, he's having these visions, and it's not just terrifying, but it's painful. And Sam wants to know, he keeps saying to Dean, like, why is this happening to me? Like, when he said that, it really hurt my feelings because I was just like,
Yeah.
that's so terrifying. And on top of it being terrifying to him personally, he feels like deeply responsible to prevent what he's seeing. And so then it's like there's that kind of level of responsibility thrust on top of just the logistical nightmare of why is this happening. Also, in the midst of it, I need to like do something about what I'm seeing. And Dean tries to calm him down and comfort him. He lies to him and says, "Oh, it doesn't freak me out. It's no big deal." And I think that's like a really sweet thing that Dean is trying to do. He can see that like Sam is very, very disturbed by this. And while we know Dean is very disturbed by this, and he will continue he will eventually show us just how disturbing this is to him. But I love that here at the beginning of it all, he's like, "Hey man, it doesn't freak me out. Like, as long as I'm with you, nothing's gonna happen to you. Like, it's fine." But I wanted to also just speak on Sam says something like, "Hey, the family is cursed." And Dean is like, "Nah." But it's like, well, come on. And also it like almost isn't it literally cursed also?
Right. Right. Um, it I do love their interactions in this episode. We know that it's going to fall apart later on, but yet Dean has that line about, as long as I'm around, nothing bad's going to happen to you.
Yes.
And I love that line because this is a good dynamic for them.
Mm-hmm.
And we know it's going to fall apart, but at least right now, Dean is trying to be so casual about it.
Yeah. Yeah. He reads the room. He takes on that this is disturbing for Sam and it's happening to Sam. I think in later seasons we watch this and it feels like whatever happens to Sam is actually a bigger impact on Dean. And like for some reason
Mm-hmm.
we bypass how Sam feels about whatever it is that's happening to him and we go straight to Dean's reaction to it. And that's all that really seemed to matter in later seasons. And it's just really sweet to see him kind of have that like intuition about I can tell my brother feels this way, and I want to make sure that he knows that I'm not going to contribute to that stress.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And even when they're arguing, going back to the whole, are we killing a monster or are we killing a human?
Yes.
Like, oh, that's such a good argument.
Hmm.
Dean is still like tactful about it, and it's
Hmm.
something that we lose in later seasons. So I think that's why I latched onto it so strongly here. Is I like this dynamic. I miss this dynamic for them.
Me too. I'm glad you brought that conversation up because that isn't a really important moment too. Because again, we follow through the same theme. There's lots of themes that we're going to continue to pull the thread on throughout the series, but the one that's like, what is a monster, what is not, and who decides. And this is another example of that when Dean kind of starts discussing again, well, we need to take Max out because he, to me, is now a monster. And so, Sam realizing that he's connected to Max, a special child, whatever they end up calling them, and he compares himself to Max. This makes Dean uncomfortable because to Dean, he's like, no, now this is our mark. Like we've identified what is doing this. It's
Hmm.
Max. He is just and he even says to Sam, he says, y'all are nothing alike. He's killing people. And so we have to ice him or whatever he says. And Sam is horribly disturbed by this, And Sam is like, well, no, we are very alike. Like we have these abilities. He doesn't say this, but they've both suffered abuse at the hands of their father. It's different types of abuse, but it is still abuse. And
Hmm.
Sam says it's not insane for him to want revenge after everything he's gone through. And I thought that was such an interesting and important like stance
Yes.
to take because I think like Dean is right that Max should not be killing people. Dean's like, it's not good enough excuse to kill your entire family. And I'm like, of course it's not. But also, Sam is like, but can you understand where he's coming from? Like, they broke his arms twice. This MAGA ass hat looking guy. Did you see the guy that interviewed that had the red hat with the exact same like font?
Oh, no, I didn't notice that.
Oh my God. So like at one point they go to their neighbors and they're like, can you
Oh,
describe to me like what it's like? And they're like, yeah, I've never seen a kid suffer so much, blah, blah, blah. I used to call CPS all the time. But he's wearing a red hat with like that same lettering. And I was just like, someone time travel and change this man's hat for me.
yeah.
But he kind of explains the whole situation and how not only was dad beating him, but like uncle was too, and stepmom would just stand by. And I wrote that misogyny is explaining how two men beat the shit out of a kid, but finishing it up by saying, but the worst part was stepmom just stood by. And I'm like, is it right that she just stood by? No. Is it the worst part?
No.
Oh.
I noted this. Like we don't have time to get into it, but it would have been really interesting to discuss the fact that, the stepmom just stood by. Why? Was she like a victim in this too? Or was she really just a terrible bystander?
Well, Max says to her, like, she's like, I never did anything. And Max was like, right, you never did anything. And she was like, I'm sorry. Like, she says something, she makes an excuse, and he goes, no, you just didn't want to die. And I was like, right. Like, it's not okay that she never stepped in. But, like, he's saying to her, essentially, we were both victims, and you chose to survive over saving me. And so I would say 100% she was a victim too,
Hmm.
you know? And like again, it's messy. I'm not saying what Max did is wrong. You can't murder people. Even though those two guys sounded like they sucked and they would deserved it.
Murder is bad, but
Yeah, we are not a pro murder podcast, okay? But when it comes down to saying like the worst part was mom just stood by, I'm like, the writers of this episode come the fuck on, to be honest. TBH.
yeah, in an episode that is really so good about like this duality of morals.
Mhm.
You
That's
know,
a
killing a human versus killing a monster. We
mhm.
kind of brush over that whole, thing of the how the abuse really panned out for multiple people.
Well, and I think that's what comes down to it when you don't have a ton of women writing. The empathy of the show lies with the young boy who had been abused,
Yeah.
and it harbors hatred and anger for the woman who had no power to stop it, but and just stood by. And I think it's a really complicated conversation to have. And I think the narrative wanted to paint it as really black and white, where it was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, she's a real cunt for like, she's a real bitch for just like standing there. And it's like, if you think about it for 4 seconds, or if you're a woman and you hear that, you think, what could she have done? And also, wouldn't she have been hurt? Like, I'm not saying I would have stuck around. I would have tried to do something myself, but it's not something you can really just, I don't know, gloss over in that way.
And yeah, I can give them a little bit for, well, they dealt with so much. This was such a lore heavy episode that maybe they didn't have time, but it would have been really interesting to even have Sam make that argument of, you're trying to kill her. Was she a victim too?
Yeah, and I do feel like they almost got there, but I think the person writing the episode didn't think about what it meant for them to say the woman's the worst in the situation,
Mhm.
because he never go like Sam never goes there. He does say, "Hey, did she slap you around? Did she ever hit you herself? No. So you shouldn't do this stuff. You shouldn't kill her." And Max is like, no, but she was complicit. And like, she was an adult in the situation who allowed this to happen, 100% complicit. But I think if they just take that one line out, like, oh, worst part was this bitch
Yeah.
stepmom. No, just take that out, and we don't even have to deal with the situation of ranking the horrors. You know what I mean? So
Right.
if we're looking at the scoreboard, like this is just one thing against it in like an entire hour of pretty great stuff.
Mhm.
And so
If
at the end of that conversation with Dean, which is where we were at that one before I went off book, but he essentially says, Dean believes he gets to decide what is and is not a monster, and then play God about which deserve his justice and which do not. And it's the same kind of thing. I think I talked with Vic on in the faith episode, because they were gonna try to take down the pastor in that one, and they had the same conversation. And we're starting to see this kind of, they're really laying the groundwork for when we, have a lot more revealed about Sam and like what's going on with him later on. And it even feeds directly into season 4 and season 5 and the giant myth arc that leads to the big finale in season 5.
Mhm. And it's kind of a theme that continues on throughout the entire show.
Mm-hmm.
But I appreciated how like morally gray it was at this point,
Yeah.
because as the writing continues and as the show continues, they get so much more set in that black and white thinking of Dean saying, "Oh, this is a monster, we've got to kill it,"
Yeah.
versus Sam's uh understanding of the different circumstances.
Yeah. And nuance, like
Yeah.
this isn't just a kid who's out here like with a magnifying glass over an anthill. Like he is deeply traumatized, he's deeply hurt, and he doesn't know a way out. Like there's a difference between a person and a monster, and I just really enjoy that we continue to have to cycle through that like ethical, moral, like philosophical kind of trolley question, the trolley discussion. You know what I mean? Like, what's for the
Yeah.
greater good? What is truly right? And where do the lines need to be drawn?
it it's so fascinating too, because again, later on we'll deal with this with like the vampires or the werewolves,
Mm-hmm.
but those are much more supernatural
Yeah.
than Max, where it's like this is just straight up someone human with
Mm-hmm.
extra powers involved, but this is someone human, but also we're the only ones who know what it is that he's doing.
Yes.
So it really is a good moral quandary that I think we kind of lose that nuance of in later seasons.
Yeah, I feel like this show, and I feel like that's what sci-fi and fantasy does, is it is always stirring a conversation that really is at its core discussing where do we fall, like morally, ethically, ideologically on these issues, whatever they may be. And they're always really important things.
Mhm.
I want to talk about when I want to see what you thought, Christy, when Max and Sam were having a conversation and Max was describing to Sam how his father used to look at him with hate in his eyes. And he said, "Do you know what that feels like?" And Sam kind of hesitates and he says softly,
Yeah.
"No." And I just, to me, it feels like a little bit he does. I don't think John hates Sam, but I don't think John doesn't blame Sam for a lot of what's going on. And so I wanted to see what you thought about that moment, or if it was just me like
Oh,
projecting John hate.
yeah, I absolutely agree because the way that Jared acts this scene is so well done because you do
Yes.
have that hesitance like no, my dad didn't hate me, but also like how do you justify that my childhood still wasn't great because
Yeah.
he also thought it was my fault.
Yes.
So it's a very well acted scene and really interesting the way that they handle that. Obviously, talking to a traumatized kid, like you're not going to dump all of your trauma about your childhood on him. Uh like no, I don't know what it's like for my dad to hate me, but he was also kind of a piece of shit and here's why.
Right.
Doesn't really fit into the conversation that they're having.
Yeah.
So the fact that Jared acts the shit out of this scene
Yeah.
really, I think, is where a lot of our interpretation of it can come from.
I agree. I think because he does the little hesitation, he also says it very softly. Where I think like I could imagine that like it's not a yes, but it's not a no. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
it's not a no like necessarily in that the no is soft and it's kind of like possibly, but I'm not sure and I want to believe I don't. And at the end of the episode, he Sam actually they're leaving and Sam of course is like blaming himself like um there's a very dramatic scene where Sam is almost getting through to Max, and it seems that Sam is the only person Max will even consider listening to in all of this. But he does end up locking Sam in a closet and he just like puts a cabinet against it with his telekinetic powers, and Sam's like locked in there, and he runs into whatever room Dean and the stepmom are in, and he nearly kills Dean. Sam sees and has another vision, and with the
hmm
horror of seeing his brother die in this vision, he accidentally poof moves the cabinet with his mind, and all Sam girls go.
yeah,
And he runs in and this is when he's trying to talk Max down, and it's like, please don't do this, please, like, don't do this, and
right. You're better than this. Just let her
let her
go.
go. You don't have to be a part, you don't have to be part of this anymore. And instead, Max turns the gun on himself. And so while they're leaving, it's very horrible because he does this in front of his stepmom and both the boys. It's very upsetting.
hmm
And it's troubling. And Sam's walking to the car and he's like, I wish I could have said something different. What if I had said more? What if I had done this and that? And he blames himself for not doing enough. He believes that it's his fault, that there was something, some phrase, some in he could have had with this boy to prevent this. And Dean's like, don't torture yourself, don't do that. And this line really killed me, Christy. Sam says he'll never forget how Max looked at him right before he died. And I'm just like, reeling. Like, what a horrible memory to have after everything he's already been through and what he will go through. Like,
Hmm.
that really hit. But then he brings up that he says, I know one thing. I feel like we're really lucky that we had dad. And Dean's like, really? Yeah, because even Dean's like, lucky? Like, I just want you to kind of be chill with him. No, no, no. Dean's just like, I never thought I'd hear you say that. But he does. He's like, yeah, it could have been a lot worse. And I'm like, yeah. As if John not beating the shit out of them daily deserves an award. And that's,
Right. That's where our bar is. Yeah.
yeah, it's really depressing that the boys are like, well, I guess we could have been having our arms broken on a regular basis and like CPS called on us and which, by the way, I can't remember if it was Elle or Vic, but one of them was telling me, I think it must have been Victoria because she was watching like extended like scenes. And in one of the scenes in an earlier episode, they're interviewing someone who used to know John, and that somebody had called CPS on John. So, that's actually canon. Like, John has had CPS call him. So it's really a dark point of view about how the boys, like, it's a dark, I guess, revelation to see the boys' point of view on their dad, because they're like, dang, my dad's dad of the year after seeing Mr. Broken Arms McGee over here, who like beat the shit out of his boy every
Yeah.
day for 21 years.
And like, not to get too like real life personal about this, but I don't know about you, but for me as a teacher, like something about that and the students that I deal with, it hit hard because
It's
you,
awful.
you hear that perspective from kids who have such bad home lives. You're like, yeah, here's what's happening here, but here's how it could have been, worse. Um, and something about that, it just hit me really hard in terms, again, of the fact that if I were dealing with this, from a teacher's perspective,
Yeah.
I'd be horrified. I am horrified.
Yeah. And then you think in terms that we are mandatory reporters. Yeah,
Yeah.
we have to report anytime that we suspect abuse. And what's really terrifying to think of, and I know this is fiction, but what's really sad and terrifying to think of for Dean and Sam is that they moved around so much. They never went to school regularly. They didn't have people in their lives to help pry them out of the type of world that John was like building for them. And
Mhm.
so when I think about it in like real world terms, where like of course he didn't want to keep them in school, like he needed to move around for his job, but John also knew like this wasn't normal to do to kids. This wasn't
Right.
something that other adults would like be okay with.
Yeah, if you had that kid in your classroom for more than a few weeks at a time, you'd start to clock that.
Yeah,
I would hope.
you would. Yeah,
And
and if you didn't, you'd be on the hook as a teacher,
yep.
as a mandatory reporter for not reporting and trying to help that child.
Hmm.
Oh, it makes me so sad. This episode is
I
so
know.
heavy. It's so heavy.
I know. But it's such a good episode in terms of like moving the lore forward and kind of building that basis for where we're going to go with Sam and Dean's different perspectives.
Yes. We could lighten the mood a little bit by talking about that they actually to infiltrate the situation. They're not FBI agents, they're not like janitors. This time they're priests. Tiny priests.
I how do I say without sounding weird how hot Sam looked?
It's not weird anymore because of Fleabag. Like honestly, we were right. We were always
Yeah.
right.
Like his hair too is so good
Yes.
in this scene. Like, yeah, the outfit is great, but his hair is honestly probably the best that it is. Season one.
Like all season. That's so funny. I said, not Sam trying to look more priestly by combing his hair back. And then I said, furthermore, sideburns.
Right?
Like his
It's
sideburns
very
are like hidden by his floofy hair. So when he combs it to the side, I was like, hey, okay, sideburns.
it's very like season 4 hair, but
Yeah. Yeah.
season 1 Sam.
Oh, I love
It's so good.
his hair evolution is one of my faves.
He
Also,
has some of the best hair like change ups in TV.
he really does. And if we get far enough, if we just are bored enough that we always want to be doing this podcast and we get to season 8, like I feel like every episode is
Oh,
just going to be about his hair.
oh, it's so good.
That's my favorite.
Between him, like you can tell what season it is by his hair.
Oh
And
yeah.
the only other show that I can say I can do that with certainty is Criminal Minds. So I adore that.
I love, yeah. When I remember when we were on, like, when we used to be on Tumblr and we just were like, we were just so like plugged into the show, and we're always like doing rewatches, or we're always making gifs and graphics and stuff that like we could name an episode by like one screenshot. Like it
Yeah,
wasn't even the
the
season. We could,
hair, the outfit.
yeah, it wasn't even a season. It was like we know what episode that is. We know the title. We know the number. We know the scene.
Yeah, what is the hair like? What is the outfit like? Between those two, I can probably name it. Or I
Probably
could have.
I used to be able to. Now
Yeah.
I have like my brain was reset, I guess, when I got on Lexapro. So I'm gonna read you some of the comments I made where I like was shocked by revelations of this show, despite the fact that I've seen this show so many times and I already know all this information. So I sent a screenshot of this note because I was like, why am I so surprised? Again, my boyfriend Corey was sitting next to me and was like, haven't you seen this like 100 times? And I'm like, yeah. But I was shocked by the revelation. Like I knew that Max was a special child, like Sam.
Yeah.
But when he started talking about his mom, I literally gasped. And I wrote the gasp, I guessed. I was like, how do I not remember these moments until they're like happening to me? Like it's not that I'm realizing, it's not that I'm finding out for the first time. It's like I'm gasping because the information is re-downloading in my brain
Yes. Yes.
for the first time. And the same thing happened when Sam moved the cabinet. I had like forgotten, like I knew that he was psychic, and I know that what's coming in season 4 is coming. I forgot about the like the telekinesis, and I wrote the Scream I script.
Those and even the flash forward or the premonition of Dean dying or
Oh,
being shot.
oh,
So good. Like I can't imagine watching that for the first time live and
oh yeah.
thinking that Dean just like died, but I
Oh,
don't remember that.
it
Like I
really
did
hurt.
once I saw it, but to see it happen again, oh shit, I have erased this from my brain.
Yeah, it's like when Carlisle was beheaded in the fourth Twilight movie, and everyone was like, and then they were like, just kidding, it's a possibility. Like you know that's a power Alice has. Like we know, literally, Sam's done it 3 times in this episode, and
Yeah,
I still was like, ugh.
right. Yeah. Oh no, we just followed Max up to the room. Like we
Mhm.
just switched scenes, not it's a premonition.
Yeah.
And the fact that it still blows my mind, I love it.
I think it's also we love Dean, and we don't want to see Jensen with a hole in his head like that. We just don't want that. I don't want to know what that looks
Right.
like.
Like that image of the blood splatter on the wall.
Oh,
Whoa.
that was unsavory.
This is such a heavy episode in terms of the story and the lore that we get, but I didn't realize until watching it again, again, just how much it really sets up the dynamics for honestly the rest of the show.
Mhm.
I I hate it and I love it.
Yeah, it's really, really good writing, and it's really well planned out. And I think like not just plot wise, but like you said, like thematically, and like the questions that the series like is always going to dive into, like these are the discussions that the show wants to have, and it's always kind of evolving that. It's always trying to progress that conversation in these little ways, at least for the first 5 seasons. And I really love to see it even this early.
Mhm. I had to look because I couldn't remember who wrote this one, and Sarah Gamble is on the writer's list,
She
and it
is
all makes sense now.
I love her. I know that you have like bad blood with her because of the magicians. I understand, but like as a writer on the show, and I know she's like a Sam fan, like she writes such good stuff for him. Like it is, of course, it's Sarah Gamble. Like of course, it's her.
Yeah, looking back, she was like one of the two really good writers for Sam and this show. So I guess it doesn't surprise me that it was her.
Yeah. Oh, she's fantastic.
Whatever bad blood I have with her outside of this fandom aside.
Right. Just fair. Okay, are you ready to rate this episode?
I am.
Okay, so let's do our wardrobe judgment. Once again, it's out of our four descriptors: horrendous, adorable, genuinely good, or terrible but great.
I said that this one was genuinely good, and then I have priest in all caps right next to
Priest.
it.
Me too. I
Like
said,
I don't know what the other outfits are for this episode because it priorities.
yeah, it doesn't really matter because we already know the score for the
Yeah.
wardrobe. I agree. I agree. I agree. Okay. So our Sam girl friendly scale on a scale from 1 to 5. Let's start with screen time.
I gave this one a 5. Like he gets so much screen time to himself that is good, that defines him for so much going on later. Like this is an ideal screen time Sam episode.
I fully agree. I said 5 also. It's so good.
Yes.
All right. So Sam girl enjoyment.
Was I too nice with this one? Like I feel weird giving it
No.
such a high score. I gave it a 5 again. Like this is again such a good Sam episode.
It's fabulous. I give it a 4.8, mostly just because my feelings are a little hurt. But like it's that's always how it's gonna be with
Yeah.
Sam.
Yeah.
All right. So our last one is a heart eyes. What did you put for this?
I gave this one like a 4.5 because I do love getting to see, Sam in the spotlight connecting with people using his powers. Oh, it's just such a good
It's
episode for
so good.
him.
I said like 4.6-ish. Like I was around that. So our overall averages, I gave it a 4.8, you gave it a 4.83. So what are the odds
Damn
that we
close.
what if we have like what are the odds that like we have rated the worst and best episode of season 1 so far? Oh my
I
god,
don't,
we're so close. Okay, so this one is 4.815. And Faith, because Vic scored it a perfect 5, is
oh,
4.85. So this is almost there, but it's not
so
exact.
close. I
Very
mean,
close.
that's a good one, so I'll give it to it. But oh, this episode makes up for everything that we just went through in the last one.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that if you had to be on with one that was so low, you could be with one of the highest.
Some redemption. Yeah.
Well, thank you,
Yeah.
Christy, for coming on.
Thank you.
Always so much fun, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.